All right, good afternoon, Facebook. My name is Todd Burchard. Again, I am a prevention specialist here at CASA-Trinity. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be doing a presentation on just giving out some information on electronic cigarettes and vaping. And I think one of the reasons we're doing this is back in the fall of 2017, we did a PNA survey, which is Prevention Needs Assessment Survey, with school districts in Tioga County. And that survey kind of assessed all different areas of substance use, risk factors, protective factors, and so on. And one of the areas that we've seen as an area of concern within Tioga County are electronic cigarettes and vaping in general. So one of the things that we saw in that survey is that of all of the students that were surveyed in Tioga County, the total percentage of all grades, so that was grades 8, 10, and 12 were surveyed. And the total percentage of all grades, about 12.8% acknowledged using electronic cigarettes or some type of vaping product, in their, whether it was the past 30 days or, overall use. So which is twice the number that reported using cigarettes or chewing tobacco in the county as well. And overall, it's about 3% higher than the national average, comparing. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to just give some knowledge, some information about, electronic cigarettes, vaping, because, you hear on the news, you see it online. This isn't, something that is on the rise within not just, adults in, our country, but more importantly, youth within our country. So we'll just kind of go through some information. This is our first presentation using Facebook Live. So, any type of feedback that can be given will be greatly appreciated. I'm going to be kind of standing off to the side, presenting the information. You can hopefully see the slides of the presentation, and we'll get started. So there are so many different electronic cigarette products out there right now. Ones that look exactly like, a regular cigarette. Other ones, maybe brightly different colored or, but still resembling that general shape of a cigarette. And then you have, other ones where you can see the actual, area where, the e-liquids or e-juice would be contained and so on. So some e-cigarettes are made to look like regular cigarettes. Again, cigars, pipes, some resemble pens. Ones that we're going to talk about more specifically are jewels, which look very much like USB sticks. And then there's, other ones that look like, kind of other everyday items. Now, these devices have not really been around that long. The first were kind of put into the market around 2007. So, the one thing is that they have not been out long. So there unfortunately isn't a lot of research to kind of go along with what the effects are yet. We're just kind of getting into, learning more and more about the effects that, the nicotine has on people, that the different chemicals that are in the e-juice, e-liquids are having on people as well. So what is an electronic cigarette? So small plastic or metal tube with a lithium ion battery. These are changing as well. As technology gets better, they're changing the way these are done. And they also have an internal vaporizing chamber. This vaporizing chamber heats the liquid nicotine or the e-juice, and it's in designed to be inhaled as one would a typical cigarette. The heat generated by the battery or single use or electronically chargeable via USB wall charger or car charger. Some of them are disposable. Some of them has replaceable cartridges for purchase. So this is kind of a diagram of how an electronic cigarette works. So first off, you have the battery. Oftentimes they're lithium-ion batteries that last a long time, but as we'll kind of talk about later on, there can be some issues that these type of batteries have, which can pose some kind of safety risks for people, especially if they're not used correctly. So then beyond the battery, you have the atomizer and the coil. What happens is the battery heats that atomizer and coil up, to various different degrees. Depending on the type of electronic cigarette or vape you have, you can adjust the temperature, which again we may talk about a little bit later, which can have some kind of things that happen as a result of increasing the temperature and so on. Also, oftentimes there is an absorbent material, cotton or so on, in the e-liquid or e-juices. The typical ingredients, 4 main kind of ingredients are nicotine, of course, propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, and different flavorants. We'll talk about some of those a little bit more in detail in just a little bit. So then when a person uses it as a typical cigarette, the e-liquid again is heated up, breathed into the lungs, and then exhaled out. We'll talk about there is some misconceptions that the what is released out of the person's mouth or nose and what's released from the electronic cigarette or vape, that's water vapor. We'll talk about what it actually is in a little while. So again, we have various different types of electronic cigarettes and vapes. Ones that you can see look similar to a pipe, other ones that look, even something like a grenade, to kind of add that kind of cool effect, for, maybe youth that could potentially be purchasing them. And then the Juuls as well. So these are ones that are on the rise quite a bit with youth, not just in our area, but across the country. They look very much like a USB, flash drive, and we'll talk about those more as well. So let's get into the e-juice and e-liquid. So again, I guess those 4 main ingredients are propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, and different flavoring chemicals, as well as nicotine. You can see that these are just 3 examples of different e-liquids. I'll leave it up to you. And based on kind of what these flavors and who these flavors are geared toward as far as marketing and who the companies want to purchase them. So again, electronic cigarettes, vapes, are they just water vapor? When somebody uses them, what's released into the air or coming out of the product, is it water vapor? So the answer is no. So e-cigarette vape pens allows the user to make large clouds that many think is just water vapor. In reality, the cloud is a mixture of many different chemicals that were either present in the e-liquid before or produced during the heating process. So a vapor is a chemical that has evaporated. Okay, so here's where the difference between vapor and aerosol is going to be. So an aerosol is a mixture of liquid and particles suspended in a gas and can contain many chemicals. Instead of just mixing with the air like a pure gas, aerosols can leave drops behind. So this next painting is going to kind of demonstrate the difference between the two. So this is a painting by Mark Tansley, and you can see you have the one woman in the front that is spraying an aerosol can, and then the woman behind is smoking what would be a typical cigarette. So again, the difference between the two, water vapor is going to, once it evaporates, it leaves the air, leaving I guess really nothing behind, where the aerosol can leave particles and droplets behind in the process. So here are some of the health risks that can be associated with vaping, e-cigarettes, and so on. So the first one is the lungs, okay? So the aerosols produced by the chemicals in e-juice or e-liquids enter into the user's lungs and then leave behind that chemical residue because of the aerosol. So, they may not, leave behind tar that a typical, and all the other chemicals that a regular cigarette may leave, but they are leaving behind those chemicals that are in the e-liquid, and those chemicals will, stick onto the surface, the inner surface, of the lungs. So again, so you have many e-cigarettes, vape pens have nicotine, which is known to have effects on the cardiovascular system, so they can increase heart rate. Next, your ears, eyes, and throat irritation is common among e-cigarette vape pen users. And then perhaps the most worrisome is the possibility of more young people developing an addiction to nicotine. All right, so back in 2007, when these products were coming out and being marketed, they were marketed as the safe, healthy alternative to using typical cigarettes. When they first came out, there were very few regulations, so you could use these products basically anywhere in buildings, restaurants, airports, and like I said, there weren't regulations really until 2016 that put a lot of those regulations onto e-cigarettes, similar to the way regular cigarettes are. So you don't typically think of, and most people I would say don't typically think of e-cigarettes being the same type of cancer causing product as regular typical cigarettes. But based on testing of the urine and saliva of teens who use e-cigs and vapes, especially the flavored ones that contain more of those chemicals, that they are exposing themselves to some of the same cancer causing chemicals found in regular tobacco cigarettes. On the packaging, again, because stricter regulations are being put in place, they're having to really list all the different chemicals and flavorings and stuff that are in the product. But before, it was really just the chemicals were listed only as different flavorings. So here's just some of the based on some of the research that is out there, some of the different chemicals that are being found in these type of products. So first off, when we talk about some of the things, the first one, when our government, goes through testing of different things, they, look and study and do research on what things, are okay to be consumed, through the digestive tract, others through, being breathed in through the respiratory tract. So one of the kind of byproducts of e-liquid vaping is propylene glycol. So for our government, it has been approved to be consumed. Propylene glycol is in, different foods, in especially processed foods and so on. And there's some, debates about whether or not that is safe as well in research. But our government has not approved propylene glycol to be safe for inhaling. So, where you may have this product, this chemical in some of the food that we eat, there have not been enough studies or anything that have found how it really affects a person when it has been breathed, especially, when it's been heated up to, higher temperatures and then inhaled into through the respiratory tract. Okay, so far it's been not approved. So again, e-cigarettes and cancer. So some of the ones, and again, some of these are difficult to pronounce, but acrylonitrile is a highly poisonous compound used in the manufacture of plastics, adhesives, synthetic rubber. It can be toxic in low doses and combines with oxygen to form formal cyanide and formaldehyde. Repeated exposure may cause central nervous system and liver damage, leukemia, and cancer of nasal passages, the pharynx, and the lungs. Now, some of the research that I looked into, Harvard did a study, I think, back in like 2015, and they reported that, formaldehyde, the propylene glycol, those were chemicals that were found in the aerosol of, different vapes that were tested. Now, this has been a kind of a hotly, debated topic, and a lot of this comes down to, the temperature that these vape pens are being used at. So if, the vape pen or, whichever product's being used is set at a very high temperature, then that is what is kind of being shown as being the cause of that vapor, converting into, some of these different chemicals. So again, it's kind of, research, more research needs to be done, but just, just some of the things that are out there. Acrolein is toxic to humans when inhaled, eaten, or touched. It's associated with lung cancer and is present in secondhand smoke and cigarettes, and endangers other than nearby through secondhand smoke. Propylene oxide is another chemical found in, some of the, the urine samples and stuff of people that have been vaping. It's classified as a probable carcinogen, as well as crotonaldine, which again is classified as a probable carcinogen. E-cigarettes and other lung diseases. So acrodiacetyl is the chemical that gives microwave popcorn the buttery smell. It's blamed for causing popcorn lung in workers in microwave popcorn packaging plants. Popcorn lung causes permanent damage to lung tissue. Acrodiacetyl has been found in many, in some of the e-liquids. So again, this is another one that is the research, I think more research needs to be done. There are people on both sides of the spectrum that say that this, this chemical is being found in some of the, e-liquids. But again, the other side is saying that a lot of this is a result of user error, that, the increased temperatures, if the vape pen or, whatever is not being used correctly, then, as a result, the higher temperatures are causing these chemicals to kind of come out. So another topic that comes along with vaping that is not so much talked about with typical, cigarette use is third-hand smoke. So it's not really known so much whether secondhand smoke from e-cigarette and vape pens are harmful, there is evidence to show that third-hand smoke is dangerous to others. So you have the person that is using their electronic cigarette, the aerosol goes out through the air. Again, because it's an aerosol, there's residue and different particles that fall onto the different, areas. So, you have the picture of the couch. So it's going to be sticking to the couch. It's going to be sticking to other objects. And so particularly vulnerable populations are going to be maybe your pets, where, their toys and their, different kind of treats. It may, go onto those, stick, and then be ingested or whatever by the animal. And then, young children, babies, again, they're constantly putting things into their mouths. So, they put something in their mouth that may have that third-hand smoke, that vapor kind of residue from the e-liquids, and then they're ingesting it, causing, different levels of possibly, poisoning or just getting them sick. So again, when we talk about e-cigarettes and tobacco use, so the health industry has worked very hard over the past 30 or so years to really get the information out about the damage that smoking can do to a person, whether it's smoking or smokeless tobacco. And so over that time, we've seen smoking rates decrease. But what's actually happening is research is showing that youth are starting with electronic cigarettes, vapings, and so on, vapes, and they're moving on to tobacco products later on. Again, originally kind of marketed as a healthy alternative or a safe alternative to smoking regular cigarettes. The research is showing that, go back real quick. The research is showing that adults who smoke e-cigarettes are actually smoking more, or maybe they go to the electronic cigarettes, but they end up going back to tobacco products. So those claims of using it as a way to quit are still, again, more research I think needs to be done to really say if it does that. So kind of again, so e-cigarettes, vape, bridge to cigarettes. So based on some studies, it's showing that adolescents who vaped, that started off with vaping, were 4 times more likely to report eventually going into cigarette smoking. So they may start as a non-user of any type of product, go on to so they're on that side of this bridge, and then they get introduced to vaping, and that what the research is showing is that it's moving them over into that cigarette user side. Again, so it's a growing business. Now here's another kind of aspect of electronic cigarettes and vaping is there's been a lot of things over the few years where there's another safety side effect of it, and that is these devices exploding, causing damage to people's faces, hands, legs. Again, I think the industry is trying to say that it's due to user error, maybe the batteries, because they're not being handled correctly, or they're being overcharged, are causing these things. So again, the industry is relating it to user error. Again, that very may well be, but again, with increased technology, they're moving away from some of those lithium-ion batteries to having more of a USB type of charger that, and I think over time these type of instances are going down because the technology is improving. But if not used correctly, this is a potential hazard that somebody could unfortunately have happen to them. So again, showing the overtime